Just wait a moment for the last of the councillors to be seated. Okay, kia ora koutou. Welcome to Governance and Finance meeting on the 27th of August. I'd just like to ask everybody to stand for the karakia e tū. E te hui, whaia te mataranga ki marama, kia whai tāke ngā mahi katoa, tu maia, tu kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. And if everyone could just remain standing for a moment. I'd just like to, as you can see, the sentiment of this karakia is about standing tall and being strong and showing respect for each other. And I think this is a really important sentiment for us all to hold on to today as our Muslim community await justice to be served. I'd like to acknowledge our Muslim brothers and sisters who have been impacted and all those in New Zealand and around the world who are supporting them. Inshallah, kia kaha, we stand with you. And we've just got te aroha if everybody'd like to join me. Okay, I've just got one apology from Councillor Fulton. I don't think there's any other apologies for today. I'll move that. Would somebody like to second? Thanks, Councillor Edgar. On to confirmation of order of business. So the meeting is being recorded for live streaming to Council's YouTube channel. Oh, sorry, thanks. It's been a while. So I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks. So on to confirmation of the order of business. The meeting is being live streamed. Just a reminder to turn your microphones on when you want to speak and off when you're finished. Recommendations will be displayed on both screens and any amendments will be shown in red. And just a reminder that if you're planning to propose an amendment, it would be great to provide the writing beforehand to the governance advisors. We are still at COVID-19 alert level 2, so just a reminder about physical distancing, particularly when we're at the tea and coffee station. We've got quite a full agenda today, so if we could think about keeping our questions short and maybe just focusing on those questions that are really pertinent. If somebody else has asked your question and it's been answered, then maybe just bring up those that you feel you really need to ask. Interests, I haven't been notified of any interest, but is there any interest that anybody would like to update or anything relevant to the items in the agenda? Councillor Edgar? Noonan, sorry.
Thank you. Look, it occurs to me, it didn't occur to me earlier, but it occurs to me that probably rather for transparency's sake than anything else is that our Rotary Club actually gave a reasonable grant to the suitor, but I just wanted people to know that it was it was a one-off, and I just wanted to bring that up for transparency, really.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. There is no public forum today, so we're going to move on to just a comment about the order of business. We do have some visitors who will be zooming in at various times, so we may just need to move around the order of business. And just an update that I'll get to when we get there, so actually I don't need to talk about that now. So confirmation of minutes, pages 9 to 20. Does anybody have any edits or questions they'd like to comment? Councillor McGurk?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley, Madam Chair. Just looking at the previous minutes, we've turned to item 11. There was a matter that was tabled in terms of the director's policy. Is that, what is the proposal? Is that being brought back? Or of events?
Would you like to answer that, Officer Harrison?
So through the chair, that item was left to lie on the table. I think it's covered in the quarterly report that it will be brought back after the next after the joint policy has been considered at the Joint Shareholders Committee.
Any other questions, comments, edits to the minutes? No? Would somebody like to move the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Anybody to second? Thanks. Mr. Murray, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, moving on to recommendations from the committee. We've got recommendations from the Audit and Risk Subcommittee from the 21st of May and the 11th of August. I'm just wondering, Mr. Peters, the chair of the Audit and Risk, if you'd like to make any comments or add anything. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, so would you like to move them, Mr. Peters? Okay, thanks. And I think Councillor Noonan will second. So that's both, it's the two recommendations at 6.1 and 6.2 on your agenda cover sheet. So all those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, moving on to the chairperson's report. That's pages 21 to 24 of your agenda. So the first one really is that at point 3, we're just noting the recommendations that were passed in the council meeting regarding Uniquely Nelson. That went straight to the council meeting due to timing. Anybody wish to ask any questions about that? No. And then I guess I'd like to, I'm not going to read through my chair's report, but I would like to just touch on a couple of things. I guess the first is that in the wake of our lockdown and a response to the economic impact of COVID-19, there was really a pretty tremendous, I would say, rallying of the councils, the business community, NRDA, iwi, Chamber of Commerce and local businesses. And that resulted in the collaboration to launch Project Kokiri. And I think that has been a pretty remarkable undertaking, and we're already seeing some successes coming from that with the We've Got This Kia Tato campaign, which I think has generated a lot of interest locally and nationally and hopefully internationally. So I'd just like to acknowledge everybody who's been involved in that collaboration and the launch of Project Kokiri. Then the other matter to, I guess, highlight is that the Nelson Airport won the Nelson Marlborough Architecture Award in the commercial category, showcasing this really remarkable building. And I think it's also would be an appropriate time to acknowledge the CEO, Rob Evans, who guided the the airport, Nelson Airport Limited, through a really significant project and obviously through some fairly turbulent times in the way with COVID-19. So as we've all seen, he is moving on, and I'd just like to acknowledge his contribution and give thanks from City Council. Then I'd also like to just touch on the revision of the procurement policy that is underway, that will be coming back at some point either to this committee or full council. One of the really, I think, important things that is coming from council having an emphasis on broader outcomes procurement are things like the living wage for our contractors, and I'm really delighted that the renegotiation with OCS earlier this year has resulted in assurance of the living wage for people who are who work for OCS cleaning our facilities, days, nights, weekends. I think that's really a positive outcome. So, and then I guess the other thing is just to really acknowledge that we're not through COVID-19. I think we all felt some, I wouldn't say complacency, but we all felt like we'd beaten it. I certainly did. And I guess what we've realised is that we are in for kind of the long haul, and the impact of that on on our community, on our businesses, on all the staff here in council is significant. So I'd just like to really acknowledge the massive contribution and commitment of all of our council staff and all of the elected members. I know everybody is working incredibly hard around the clock. Many people haven't taken any time off at all, and I just, would really like to acknowledge everybody and say thanks for that. Ngā mihi nui. And I think that that's it for me. So if there's any questions on the Chair's report? Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You passed over very quickly, in my view, the items 310 and 311 there on page 23 of your report. Very significant happening there with the OCE cleaning staff. Now, tell us a little more about OCS. That's an international facilities management company, is it? Or is it a company of some significance?
I might defer to an officer if they have more information, but my understanding is that at least that it is a national cleaning company, that they do work for other councils around the country, and they already have a living wage arrangement with other councils. So we're not the first in this, but it is, I think, Auckland certainly, and possibly others. And it's fitting, I think, that Nelson is also supporting a living wage for OCS staff.
Yes. The living wage is going to be increased by the 1st of September to $22.10. So that's significant, and that's only a week away, isn't it? I'm sorry, do you want to speak? Shall I? Madam Chair, I wonder whether you would be of a mind to accept from me today a motion, and I'm sorry, it just came to mind when I saw it there and I wrote it down very quickly, that I would like to move that the Nelson City Council make application to the accreditation Authority Board for a licence to be an accredited living wage employer, and in turn use the living wage employer trademark and workmark. So if I could move that, I would be grateful.
Councillor Courtney, thank you very much for that, and I really appreciate the sentiment. Having just spoken with Officer McDonald, She has suggested that the appropriate approach would be to request a report be brought back to council or committee on the living wage. So I'm wondering how you would feel if we...
Thank you, and I respect, as you know, our officer, but look, we know the position here. We're continually told by officers that we are a living wage organisation. And I say it's about time we nailed our flag to the mast and took the step, as ASB Bank has just the other day, as other councils have around the country. And we stand tall and set an example for the rest of the community, because this is a significant time, and we talk about it, and we don't action our desires, our thoughts on this particular important area. We are here today in this community representing very humble people who haven't got a voice and have a very meagre wage. And I think it would be a good example to set this council, it's a council of fairness, this one, and I think it would sit well in the community and with the people we represent, and I'm happy to move that if someone would be so kind as to second it.
Can we hear what the, sorry, Madam Chair, can we hear what the proposal is again? The wording, please.
I move that the Nelson City Council make application to the Accreditation Advisory Board for a licence to be an accredited living wage employer, and in turn use the living wage employer trademark and wordmark.
Can I ask a question?
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be on council with Councillor Mel Courtney, because you never know what's coming next, and I like being that way. So just for argument's sake, is the wording of that recommendation appropriate for what Councillor Courtney is trying to achieve?
We'll just check with the officers.
Yes, Chair Sampson, I'll second that.
Thanks very much. We'll just get some advice from the officers, but I appreciate that, Councillor Skinner.
Yeah. Wearing that.
So through the chair, I guess one thing for us to consider is whether we would say this matter was really on the agenda for consideration in the way that it's been put, which is a reference, and now we have a substantive recommendation. So staff feel that probably it is not. That's the first point. The second is that we don't have any information here about what costs might accrue to council, whether there's a cost for signing up, whether the use of these marks has an annual fee. Those are the sorts of things that we could tell you in a report, but we couldn't give you any information at the moment.
I'm happy to amend it to explore. Officers explore.
Would you be happy to ask for a one-page report back, or?
No, look, I'm going to let it stand as it is, quite frankly, because I think we all know in our hearts this needs to happen. You know, a number of councils throughout New Zealand, over 100 businesses in New Zealand, ASB Bank just the other day, as I said, Hamilton, and I think it's time we just nailed, as I said, our flag to the mast and accept the fact that this is what we should be doing, and I'm sure we are, more or less, across the board. I'll have to question NELMAC when they come before us later in the day.
So I guess from my perspective, Councillor Courtney, I absolutely support your initiative, and I also believe that it is an important thing for us as a council to stand up and support. And I think the goal to become an accredited living wage employer, and for our contractors also to for us to expect that of our contractors. However, I feel that we are in a process at the moment with the review of the procurement policy where that is actually being looked at. So if you wouldn't mind, I would actually really like to.
I'm happy to second that, so I'm still
Yep.
behind.
Okay.
I'm very happy for it to proceed because I think it's timely and I think there's been enough talk. There really has been.
Okay, so, yeah, noted. So I'm going to move on. I've got Mayor Rees who would like to speak.
Yes, I would. I'd like for you to take a brief adjournment, Madam Chair, and I'd like to know whether under standing orders you can actually take what has been moved and seconded and whether that can actually procedurally happen. I think we need to get some, I absolutely think Councillor Courtney, I endorse his sentiment. I think around this table there is very strong support for that position, but we do have some process we have to follow around making decisions at council, and I don't think it's appropriate for you to be put in a position where this is coming ad hoc up today on something so important. We want to do it right if we're going to do it.
Okay, we'll just take an adjournment for a couple of minutes. Welcome back. So I would just like to, first of all, acknowledge Councillor Courtney. This is a really important matter, and we need to, I think, consider it in such a way that it is that all elected members have an opportunity to consider it and that the community is aware that we're considering it. Because it's not an item on the agenda, what I'm actually going to ask for today is that the officers come back to us with a brief report. So I'm not going to proceed with the motion, but I am going to acknowledge that you have moved that, Councillor Courtney, and I applaud you for it. So thank you very much.
No, I have moved a motion and it's been accepted. It's been seconded.
Per standing orders, it hasn't been accepted. It's just been moved and seconded. And because it's not an item on the agenda,
I'm tying the item into your 3.11 on page 23, and it refers to the OCS cleaning staff working, maintaining council facilities, now receiving a living wage, and I'm tying it in for that.
So the item is actually my chair's report.
A very good one too.
Thank you. But really, I absolutely acknowledge that this is important and it is work, I believe, that is underway and will come back to committee, either this committee or to council. But there is a process that we need to follow to ensure that we're successful in this.
So you'll help me make it happen.
I am working on it hard behind the scenes. Thanks, Councillor Courtney. Are you happy then to withdraw the?
With a great deal of reluctance.
Okay.
You don't need to withdraw that.
Okay.
Courtney,
Thanks.
you don't have to withdraw it, Councillor Courtney.
Do we really need to continue talking about this? I kind of feel like we're. Okay, Councillor Laurie, you've already you've spoken, so I'm actually going to move on to Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. We do need a little bit of backbone. It's not something we need a report telling us what living wage is, and this is exactly what we get criticised by public is turning wheels slowly in red tape. This is something that we've well been aware of for the last 6 years, and it's something that councillors with political party standings have pushed for the last 6 years, and now we come to it, everyone's chickens out. This is not bad. This is not good form. I understand you want to step carefully and lightly, but this is something which is quite simple and straightforward, and it's not in regards to running of
Point of order.
This is about paying
Called a point of order, you
fees.
don't hear it.
Councillor Laurie.
My point of order is Councillor Skinner's accusing other councillors of chickening out, which is just pretty, hang on, point of order, you have to listen to it, which is unfair and misleading, given that we haven't actually had the opportunity to vote on it yet.
Okay,
Put it to a vote and then it's...
so I'm going to move on to Councillor Edgar.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, you need to rule on the point of order. I'm really sorry, you do need to rule on that point of order.
Whether you uphold it or not, my point is Councillor Skinner is misleading when he says that we are chickening out.
Okay, yeah, I do think it is disrespectful, and I'm going to ask you to withdraw that comment, Councillor Skinner. Respectfully, Councillor Skinner, it's not, my comment is not in regards, the point of order is not in regards to your feeling about the living wage. It is in regards to the comments about other councillors and their integrity. So
I'm not concerned about it's not about feelings. I'll withdraw the word chicken out. I'm disappointed that here's an opportunity for us to make a decision on something we've talked about for a long time. Many around this table in their campaign and their roles in political parties, dare I say it, have pushed that we should be doing it firmly and squarely, and this has come up, and we're talking about cleaning staff being paid a fair wage, which is great, and now we're not prepared to put a stamp on that, and it's something which has been asked for. But I'll withdraw my comments. It wasn't meant to be disrespectful to the councillors, because I know they're very well thought in their decision making. It's probably a reflection, as you put, of my frustration that we're asking for a report, and I hope not consultation.
Madam Chair, I'm going to call another point of order to say that I think Councillor Skinner's comments that saying that elected members are not prepared to take that step is again misleading. That is misleading.
I will withdraw that, and
There'll
be an opportunity at a later time for people to make the decision in an informed manner if they so need.
okay, thanks, Councillor Skinner. I'm going to move on to Councillor Edgar.
Thank you for that. I actually just wanted to move your report. I'm aware we've got a very big day, and so for expediency, I'm happy to move your report, and thank you very much for it.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar. I think we've got Councillor Noonan happy to second that. Before I put the motion, I would just like to acknowledge and say thank you to all of those councillors, elected members around the table who are supporting Nelson City Council's push to become living wage certified. It is something that we have all talked about a lot, and it is an important issue, and I just want to assure you that there will be a report coming back on this. I'd like to put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, so we've got, so we're going to skip past NRDA statement of intent at the moment. They're coming in at about 11 and move on to item number 9, the carry forwards, pages 73 to 80. Do we have an officer who would like to speak to that? Thanks. Jessica? Yes. Claire, hi. Thanks very much, Claire. Is there anything that you'd like to
through the chair, I'll take the report as read and I'm happy to accept any questions.
Do we have any questions on the carry forwards report? Do we have somebody who would like to move the carry forwards report? Thank you, Councillor Courtney. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Rainey. Any debate? No. Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, we're going to move on to the quarterly report. However, I will just let members know that we may need to pause the quarterly report because we have quite a small window when the NRDA representatives are going to be available. So we'll start on the quarterly report, or the end of year report actually. Page 81 to 115, item number 10. And would you like to speak to that, Officer Tregurtha?
I'll just presume that the report has been read and open for questions.
Okay, have I got questions? Councillor Edgar?
Yes, thank you for that. Could you please explain, I'm in section 5 of the report, and it highlights a number of areas where expenditure is greater than budget, and it refers back to C 5.9, but it also keeps saying the comment throughout them due to the allocation of costs being different than budget. And so firstly, I want to know, why is the allocation of costs different than budget? I mean, is this an error? Is this something that should have been fixed? And if you could just explain, I did email through this question, so you should know the details around it. But yeah, it is more this due to the allocation of costs being different than budget. Why are they being allocated differently to budget?
So through the chair, staff costs is a little bit more complex. There's multiple items. So overall, staff cost budget and actuals are aligned. The allocation is due to, mainly we do an allocation model. So any of the support units, we then allocate out across the organisation into all the different activities. And there's also timesheets and things like that that are sometimes budgeted, at a point in time, but it's hard to know exactly how much time is going to be needed. So overall, we have no concerns as an issue. We're currently looking to try and reduce the variances. We have no concerns that there's any issue from an audit perspective or anything like that. So it's more just the split, I guess, appears to be misleading. And we apologise for that, but we're doing the best we can, and we are currently reviewing a way to make it hopefully align better.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 115, Marina Hardstand. So both the cost and the time are red and the quality is orange. And I know this is a sport and recreation matter, but it is in this report. And I had emailed this through. I was just wondering, what's the timing of when the review is taking place that we approved as part of the annual plan budget, and when this will next come to committee meeting?
Through the chair, sorry, I need to, I'm waiting on a response back from the sports staff on that. Oh,
Thank you through Chair, and here it is. Just a very brief, response to say that we'll have an update for the Sports and Recreation Committee in the quarterly report that we're just preparing at the moment, and we'll be able to advise a timeline in response to that question. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. And sorry, my final one was just on the 8.2, which was the matter that Councillor McGurk also raised earlier. So the joint appointment policy didn't come onto the Joint Shareholders Committee meeting that we've had earlier this week. I was just wondering if staff had any further updates on when that might come back. I would maybe anticipate it would require a workshop first between the Joint Shareholders Committee, for example, but is there any update on that?
So through the chair, that report's been prepared by TDC, and my understanding is it will be coming to the November committee meeting, but I will note your question around a workshop.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Courtney, and anybody else have questions while I'm
Thank you,
speaking?
Madam Chair. I'm looking at page 83, 4.7. It's in relation to the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts, NCMA, and I'm referring to the recruitment of a business advisor for the NCMA, and that's been delayed. It was a clear direction from council that that recruitment be made following their approach for funding. Can I have an update on that? Is that now proceeding? The process in place to recruit a business advisor?
Officer Ball.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, we picked that up again post-COVID and had that underway. Went into conversation with NCMA. They've raised some questions for us that need some further discussion. They've put a view through to us that they'd like to make a change to the way that's framed. So we need to do some further work with that in consultation with the chair of this committee and the mayor, and we'll need to come back to you. To follow up on that, through you to Mr. Ball, Officer Ball, they clearly understand, do they, that that's the direction of council, that we do appoint a business advisor? They're not varying that at all, are they?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm not detecting that it's a case of resistance or wanting to be difficult, rather that that time has moved on since those decisions were made, and they have introduced some other considerations which, seeing as we're in a public meeting, I don't want to elaborate on, but they would like to have some further engagement with us at a governance level on some suggestions that they have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Any other questions from members? Mary.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Just a question to Ms Harrison, just in relation to that report that's coming to the next Joint Shareholders Committee. How are Nelson City Council's issues or views being incorporated into that report, Ms Harrison?
So through the chair, the report that was requested was around the discussion around whether or not there should be individual appointments as well as joint. The joint, the idea of having a workshop pre that is probably the best way to do that. And I know we do actually have a joint council meeting pre that we could actually tack that onto potentially.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that would be a good option to discuss with the TDC leads, and I certainly would support that. I'm seeing nodding around the table here too. Thank you.
I'm sure that Councillor Officer Harrison will note that. Thanks very much. Any other questions, Mayor Rees? No. Thanks, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I note that on the Treasury Compliance Report, page 110, it's a different format to the one that we've been used to. And this format actually doesn't provide, I don't believe, the same level of information in terms of the range of the parameters that are acceptable. It provides all the information about where we currently stand. And I wonder if, I don't mind how it's presented, but I'd like, if possible in future, to see the same level of information around Treasury compliance. And I quite liked the traffic light system that showed where we were against it. It makes it a much easier report to read and it's more informative. I wonder if we could consider reverting to either the old report or at least containing the same information.
Officer Harrison, are you able to respond to that?
So through the chair, this has ticks to show where we're compliant in all of our Treasury policies. I'm happy to have a discussion with the Chair of Audit and Risk around what his expectations are, but this is a standard Treasury report that does show all our compliances, and there's nothing missing from here. It's just a different presentation, but I'm happy to take that discussion offline.
Thanks very much for that, Officer Harrison. Maybe Mr. Peters could catch up with you sometime outside of the meeting. If there's no other questions from members, I've got a couple of questions. So I guess my first question is page 86, 5.19, investment management expenditure greater than budget. So I'm just wanting to clarify if this is interest on, I guess, potentially the emergency reserve, so on debt and borrowings.
Sorry, through the chair, which paragraph were you referring
Sure.
to?
5.19 on page 86. So my question is this interest on the emergency reserve, so on debt and borrowings?
So through the chair, no, it's not. There were the emergency reserve was not drawn down in the last financial year, drawn down any further. So it's just variances on other reserves within that activity.
Thanks. And then I've got another question on page 105 under the end of year performance measure results. Page 105. So I guess my questions are really just around the performance measures that we're using. So the first one under economic, it says GDP measured as 3-year average, and then percentage increase in GDP per annum is at least equal to or better than the national average. And I just wondered whether we feel that GDP is a satisfactory measure, and whether we should, my feeling is that the focus is solely on an economic measurement, and whether we could be also considering some kinds of measures for productivity, prosperity, wellbeing measures, and whether there's any ability to be considering other measures.
To the chair,
Yeah, these performance measures were developed as part of the last long-term plan, and we have a process in place to review these as part of the 2021 long-term plan. One of the main changes that elected members will see that staff will be recommending is that performance measures that we cannot directly influence or cannot significantly influence should be replaced by measures that we can. So in this example, GDP, we only have a small influence on in regards to both our spending and also the work that is undertaken for council through the NRDA. So we'll be looking at something sort of more meaningful in relation to council's work for this, and you'll see that in our recommendations for performance measures going right across all activities.
Thank you very much. I've just got a couple of follow-up questions on the same page. So the third line down, also under economic, regarding measures that contribute to the vitality and attractiveness of Nelson CBD, and the measure is total annual spending. And I just thought that maybe it's possible for us to consider other measures to measure the vitality of a CBD, because I anticipate that more than just the amount of money spent actually contributes to the vitality of the CBD. And I was thinking about, I remember there was officer or staff member Alan Gray did a survey, I think it was called the Life of People data or something like that, that was measuring, how much movement there was in the city, people coming in and out and spending time. And I wondered whether those kinds of measures could be incorporated into us measuring the vitality of our CBD.
To the Chair, thank you. We will certainly look at that, and we'll have discussions with the City Development team on that. What we would probably be sort of looking at in this regards is the projects that council actually undertakes in the CBD that contribute to the vitality, as it were, and making sure that those projects are delivered on time within budget. And the like. You're quite correct. Once again, the total spending in the CBD is something which council only has sort of limited influence on, but we certainly can have an influence in what actually occurs, the work that we do with retailers, the work that we do with the community, how we promote the CBD either directly or with our partner Uniquely Nelson.
So possibly looking at the events that we're putting on and attendance at those. I think we just, as we all know, retail spending has changed dramatically, and I think that we need to be careful that we're not measuring something which is no longer relevant in terms of trying to measure the life of and the vitality of our CBD.
Agreed.
And then I've just got one more question on that page. So under economic, it's the fifth one down, I think. It measures the number of out-of-town visitors attending major events, and I just wondered why there's a focus on out-of-towners rather than residents. Is it because out-of-towners contribute more economically through accommodation and that kind of thing?
To the Chair, so this relates through to the funding that council provides through to the economic events. So that's through the the Events Development Committee. The committee has a set of criteria that it follows to assess whether or not there is spending, and it is sort of looking at a return of a minimum of 10 to 1 in this area. The reason why it's out of town was pre-COVID-19, bringing money into this city from outside was seen to have sort of, greater benefit, because people, when they visit, they are more likely to eat out at restaurants, they stay at other accommodation and the like. part of the consideration sort of post-COVID-19 is about encouraging spending by our own community as well. And that is one of the factors when the annual plan was prepared for 2021. Council sort of gave the Event Development Committee more leeway to consider events which targeted locals rather than out-of-town visitors.
Thank you very much, Mark, and I look forward to review of the measures. So that's all from me. If no other elected members have questions, then I'm looking for somebody to move the annual report. Thank you very much, Councillor McGurk. Anybody like to second it? Thank you, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So we're just going to take a 5-minute adjournment while we get ready for the NRDA representatives to be joining us on Zoom. So if everyone can be back at 11. Thanks very much. Can I just welcome members back to the table? We're moving on to item number 8, pages 25 to 72 of your agenda, the Nelson Regional Development Agency's Statement of Intent. And I believe that we have Mark Rawson and Meg Matthews on Zoom. Do we have you both? Yes. Are we going to bring them up? Oh, yeah, I can see you now. Atamarie, welcome, Mark and Meg. Really nice to see you both. Hope you're doing well. Can you hear us okay? Yep, you can hear us. Can we hear you? Just give them a minute.
Cool. I think we've been unmuted now. Can you hear us?
Yeah, well, welcome. Really nice to see you both. Before we get underway, I would just like to acknowledge the really amazing work that the NRDA team have done in relation to Project Kokiri and supporting local businesses in this COVID environment. So we did make some comments about that earlier, but you wouldn't have been on Zoom. So I just want to acknowledge you both and your team, and yeah, massive thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we've got a new officer this morning, first time at the table, Jessica Bensman. She is the Nelson Tasman Economic Portfolio Manager, and she has been with us since the very first day of lockdown. So welcome, Jessica. I hope it's going well. And is there anything that you'd like to speak to in regards to the report?
Thank you very much. So just introducing the report, obviously as a bit of background, this year's Statement of Intent was developed in the context of the economic impact of COVID-19 and also with the information that was gathered through the independent report that was carried out by Martin Jenkins late last year. And so that's meant that we have seen a bit of a change in this year's Statement of Intent in terms of the key areas of investment that we're doing and also in the way that NRDA are collaborating with other partners such as the Nelson Tasman Chamber of Commerce and other government agencies. It's also meant quite a significant change for NRDA in their funding structure, and because of that they have sought other funding sources and been successful in seeking additional funding to support the work that is needed to deliver Project Kokiri over the next 12 months. So you'll be aware of the increased support that Nelson City Council has made available for NRDA and Project Kokiri this year. They've also been successful in securing some central government funding, and a process is underway where TDC are considering if they are able to provide any additional support this year. Project Kokiri is an adaptive process, and there will be continued iterations throughout this year as NRDA and other stakeholders adapt to the changing needs and the economic situation. And so we are expecting that there will be a revision of the Project Kokiri document in the lead up to NRDA's annual general meeting in October this year.
Thanks very much, Jessica. Meg and Mark, would either of you like to speak to the Statement of Intent before I open up for questions from elected members?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Jessica, for that introduction. Look, we just want to reiterate what Jessica said. We have put a request into TDC as well for additional funding of 250,000. We need to wait till the 10th of September to hear an outcome on that, but we are fairly positive and confident that we'll get some contribution from them. Mark has worked really hard in working alongside private sector as well, and so there will be an element of private sector funding coming into this year's budget. It will be for work that's in addition to some of the work identified in Project Kokiri, for example, around the We've Got This campaign, which is having significant success, and it's heartening that we have private businesses that want to invest specifically in that. campaign. That's probably enough from me. Mark?
No, that's it. I'm happy to, I think that's enough. Happy to take questions, if that's okay.
Thanks very much. I've got questions from Councillor Edgar, Councillor Courtney, Councillor McGurk to start with.
Thank you. Through the chair. Hi, Megan, Mark. Look, firstly, I just wanted to comment on clearly the significant amount of work you've been doing recently, but then also to get the final statement of intent done. Normally it's a variation on the draft, and this one, of course, has been anything but. Well, it certainly has been a variation, but not a minor one. So as well as putting out Project Kōkiri. So thank you for the thorough work and also your support of our community. My question, it's not new. It's probably from the very first economic update you provided during lockdown. And again, I didn't see it reflected in the report, and that is the impact on women, particularly employment. You've mentioned under 30s. The statistics do show that COVID impacted sectors are more likely to employ women than men, even where there are more men likely to be employed in a sector, that the part-time roles, which are the ones that have been shed, thank you, women are more likely to fill those part-time roles, and then also that due to the unequal distribution of caregiving arrangements, that this is a barrier to women seeking employment. And that's, even when there isn't an economic crisis, and we know that this has been exacerbated again. And then again, the point that I have raised numerous times that isn't new is just that the focus on shovel-ready projects to stimulate the economy, that most of the jobs are in industries that statistically are more likely to employ men. So, for example, construction, 85% of employees are men. So I was just wondering where in Project Kōkiri or in your statement of intent the issues for women are going to be addressed. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Councillor Edgar. A couple of comments I would just make. Actually, this issue came up at the last Regional Skills Leadership Group, which actually did define that in this region, in the Nelson Tasman region, at the moment, through the work ready or the newly unemployed, women made up about 40% or 42% actually, I think, of that workforce or that unemployment population, which actually is a bit lower than the New Zealand average, apparently, at the moment. And that was that information was provided specifically because this question had been raised at the previous Regional Skills Leadership Group meeting. So that's not to say I don't agree with the fact that I believe there's probably a bit of a hidden unemployment element from those who have registered for unemployment. But I just wanted to sort of make sure that we're clear about what data we have been provided at the moment. I guess in terms of how does a statement of intent look to address that? You're correct, we haven't specifically looked to pull that out. But I would tend to say, though, that if I look at things like the destination management planning approach, and certainly the product development of tourism products, particularly in the food and beverage sectors, as one of the big focus areas, that is one of those areas that has been indicated that there's a higher proportion of females in the workforce. Hence, they're also being identified as one of the biggest areas for impact. So that's something I can think of straight away, but we haven't, you're right, we haven't absolutely nailed it, but I am very aware of the issue and challenge that presents. And believe you me though, within my team structure, of which there's only 2 boys and we're both called Mark to try and keep it simple, the team do remind us of these issues all the time. But yeah, I don't have a specific silver bullet at this point.
No, that's fine, thank you. And I absolutely agree that, and again, it is a comment I have raised before, that I believe there is a strong proportion of hidden statistics here, because a lot of people who, especially if you've lost your part-time job, they won't necessarily go on a job seeker benefit. They may not be eligible because their family as a whole of income is not eligible. And so I do believe that there is a lot more. It is very good that it's being considered and addressed through that regional leadership skills group. And I think as long as we're always looking at any groups where there's disparity, so we know youth, we know women, we know Maori, I think that's a key, as we need to look at those areas of disparity so that we're bringing everyone up. So yeah, I'm happy that it's being addressed through that regional skills leadership group. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Mark and Meg. Thank you so much for the job you're doing there at the NRDA. It's so important and has been even more so during the COVID-19 lockdown period. Mark, I'm looking at page 25 at 2.2, where it says an independent review of the NRDA operations identified that there is a need to improve alignment and communication between the Council and the NRDA regarding economic development and objectives. And so it goes on. Where do you think you were falling short in that area?
Through you, Madam Chair, the review identified that what it's really talking about is getting some clarity of the 4 or 5 objectives that the 2 local authorities are really clear about and would like us to focus our time and effort on. And I understand that that process is going to be underway in the fairly near future. And so what that was saying is, due to the fact that there was perhaps not that level of clarity at times, our statement of intent and some of our communication is quite broad across all the areas that we're trying to address. And they felt that that could be improved. Operationally, with the engagement with Nelson City Council is great from my perspective. I mean, Meg and I connect with the Mayor every month officially, and probably over lockdown in particular, probably lots unofficially. And I have the fortune of working with most of your team on different aspects, whatever that might look like. So I feel like operationally it's not too bad, but it was really a comment that was related to clarity of focus around where you seen you wanted us to be putting our time and effort, so that we could get that a bit tighter and tidier, which won't be an unsurprising response, I hope, for everyone around the table, because I've been asking this saying this for a while.
Thank you for that, Mark. And I'll just, with your indulgence, Madam Chair, a second question on page 27 at 5.3.2. It makes reference there to new reporting framework to NCC and TDC. What improvements do you foresee in that regard? In regard to the new reporting framework that they are suggesting?
Yeah, I think, again, that is related to getting some clarity of expectations and trying to get a tighter and tidier level of reporting. I'd like to think that we're starting to try and bring that through in Project Korkori too, where we're trying to move away from a whole lot of operational outcomes or outputs and focus a little bit more on impact of what we're trying to do to put that into more meaningful sort of speak. I think the second part of that is we, as our board, are about to go into a strategic planning session in October, which is designed to also get our team aligned around what the expectations look like and how we might be able to particularly communicate what we do and the impact of what we do in a manner that is clearer and more relevant to a wider set of stakeholders than perhaps just our narrower business group. So I think that's our take on it. I guess the flip side would be getting some real clarity of what would council like to see in that space. And I think Nelson City's pretty good at being clear about that most of the time, but we do react to multiple reporting environments at times, which hopefully will be tidied up through this process.
My final question, Mark, through to you is the budget. You've done remarkably well with that budget. I'm pleasantly surprised. Thank you. Thanks, of course, to the government contributions, or two government contributions. Did you actually apply for those amounts, or were you just allocated them? Because having a shortfall of 250,000, I think is an excellent result under the circumstances. So, how did you arrive? How did those funds arrive?
Yeah, look, we led a bit of an approach to. It definitely wasn't given to us. We had to certainly apply, and we also had the good fortune of being part of some of the groups that helped the MB conversation early on to think that they might put support into organisations like us, which would help take some pressure off, for example, large number of small companies in the tourism sector. So certainly we led a bit of a process there, and I've been really stoked with the amount of support we got. I think when I said to you earlier on, the expectation was to try and aim for about $500,000, and I was quite happy to be able to secure a bit more than that. So that's great. And the other thing I would say is it's also not just the MB investment. I should acknowledge the role that the Ministry of Social Development has been playing alongside us at the moment in supporting us for some of the on-the-ground delivery from a business perspective alongside their teams, because that's also a significant factor in enabling us to be able to do what we do and bridge that funding shortfall.
If I can just interject, I think Mark's playing quite a modest, speaking modestly, he played a really influential role in actually central government deciding that they needed to have the strategic tourism investment and to distribute this money. So it was through work that Mark and the Project Corporate did early on to be able to allocate that share of money.
Thanks for that, and well done, Mark, on that really valuable work. I've got Councillor McGurk, and then Mr Murray and Councillor Laurie.
Yeah, thanks, and through you, Madam Chair. First, a commendation really to both to the NRDA for the nimble and agile response to the COVID response, and probably the regional and joined up approach to the to Project Kokery. So I think a big ups to the team there. The question I've got really is around on page 43. I'm looking at 1.2. Just bring it up, and I'm just looking at the product levels and the attraction of sort of high value jobs, and just wondering about the measures you've got in there. I'm just wondering if could you just probably explain why you've picked those measures in terms of the if you look at 1.2, the establishment of 3 business enhancement clusters, and then at least 40 involved in research invited to come from the districts. I'm just wondering, is it, it's more about I'm just wondering about how do you know you've got success?
Yeah, look, really good question. So why did we pick that level of focus? 2 things. One is the ultimate aim here is driven on trying to identify those companies in our region, a small number of them. They're medium-sized ones, not the bigger ones, so that medium-sized companies we can actually really assist with accelerating their recovery. And the key part was that all of these companies in this space, they have a long local supply chain. That means they've got a lot of local suppliers, whether it's growers, whether it's warehouses, whether it's transport suppliers, all that sort of thing. And that supply chain is traditionally made up of a whole lot of small companies. So what we're really trying to do in this space was to focus on organisations where we could work with a small number and hopefully assist to make quite a step change, which would have an influence of a market-led recovery for all those small to medium businesses in the region that are in their supply chain. Because the practicality of us trying to keep going, actually, at the fact that we're now over 1,400 small companies that we've been dealing with since lockdown is quite challenging with our resource base. So this is a way to try and influence as many people as possible through targeted, narrower focus on some of those companies. In terms of the three clusters that have emerged from that piece of work, they're actually driven by research we did with around about 40 or 50 sort of companies like this who have really come back and told us that the three clusters we need to focus on, so it has moved on from the statement of intent actually, are in the areas of a whole lot of market-led, export market-led activity where companies can come together in a small cluster and actually get a whole lot more benefit for all the marketing effort that they're putting in, particularly offshore, and collaborate around a whole lot of different things that they tend to all do individually. The second area is we've got a bit of work going on in what we're calling, it's really capital productivity. What does that mean? Basically sharing resources that suck up a whole lot of capital that at the moment many individual companies are kind of using, and because of the seasonal nature of some of our activity, we've got quite a lot of capital tied up in some things that are only used for 4 or 5 months, and then they're free for the other period of time, but others have also invested some money in that space. And then the third area of focus is it is around the skills and capability to lead change, but also adapt to change is the other message that's come through. And I hope you can probably understand that that has all of a sudden become such a massive issue for many companies trying to deal with COVID. So that's sort of how we come up with it and why we're focusing in that area. And in terms of what will success look like, it will be the impact that we've been able to bring in terms of either additional investment, probably government investment or government services, as well as really maintaining similar or maybe slightly higher levels of employment within those organisations over 12 months, because that's really what we're trying to do here.
Thanks, Mr. Murray.
Thank you and good morning. I'm looking at page 72 of the agenda, which is Appendix 8.1, or Appendix 2 of the report statement of financial position. Look, there's been a lot of talk about the annual activity matching revenues with costs, but I'm looking at the balance sheet here with a little bit of concern, and I'm just asking myself a question as to whether you've turned your mind into a request for a capital injection. Now, I'll come to the reasoning for that. Simply, if people looking at the page will see that the net assets of the business as at the 2020, 1st of July, is 294,000. We've got a shortfall currently forecast of 250 if we don't plug that gap, which says to me your net assets are basically gone if that's not plugged in or plan B or C doesn't fit in. But more concerningly, there's a current assets there of, I don't know, 800 odd thousand and current liabilities of 700, which says to me you've probably got some liquidity cash flow pressure hit in the background here somewhere trying to keep yourself current, pay your debts. So look, it's a little bit of concern that I'm raising around liquidity, meeting your obligations in normal course of business, and also having more assets than liabilities in the solvency issue. And if that is indeed an issue, I'd hate to sort of think that this was underpinning or undermining or diverting attention away from the economic recovery stuff and the great programs that you got running. And if indeed you need a bit of cash injection, then perhaps we need to be talking about that.
Yeah, you can go. I'll jump in.
Great. Look, that's a great observation. And what I would say is we're a small business, so cash is king, and I watch it every day. So we are we're managing cash flow okay, and some of our partners have helped in that way by when they pay their bills. But yeah, looking at the longer term, it's a very good observation. We're absolutely looking to get some clarity from the question that was asked earlier on around the review, or the things that were raised by Jessica, to get some clarity of focus, so that we can come and have a discussion through the LTP around a 3-year statement of intent, which is an intention to try and look to do what we can to strengthen that balance sheet, and also strengthen our ability to work in a manner that looks at some medium to longer term type activity, as opposed to every year running on a bit of a treadmill. And so we fully intend to come back with some options around that as a result of all this planning work going on at the moment. But what I have requested of the board was to just put pause on that for a couple of months while we sort of deal with the volume of response activity that we're sort of just trying to get across right now, particularly as hopefully we don't go in and out of too many more lockdowns, which causes some challenges.
Yeah, and can I just add, Ms. Murray, good question, and it is something we signalled for the SOI last year around our sustainability and our equity balance. So we do have a policy that we don't want to be dipping below 220, which you can see in 21 we slightly do, but we have forecast to jump back up, to slowly creep that back up. So we are managing it from a board perspective as well. But if we can get that long-term 3-year sustainability plan, then that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Mark and Meg. Similar question, but on a sort of bigger frame, wider frame. Is it possible that the statement of intent won't be fit for purpose once the wage subsidy era ends and we find out where we're really at with employment and we find out where the economy is really at?
My response to that, and thank you to Jessica for highlighting that in the statement of intent report. We have designed Project Korkeri and really this statement of intent to operate in sort of 3-month sprints, or 3 to 4 month sprints, which is designed to absolutely reflect that situation that you've just outlined, realising that we may have to redeploy some resources or flex where we focus back to more on responsive stuff than some of the regenerative stuff that sits in here if the economic situation deteriorates any further. While there's been some cautious optimism coming through in recent times, I feel we'll have a far better picture around that around about November this year, as you quite rightly say, when the wage subsidies have come off. We have a reasonable view on the liquidity of small companies in the region, and that's going to pose, some challenges, particularly as they haven't had some seasonal sort of uplift. And we feel like November is a pretty important time to understand exactly where we're at. And the last part of that is we're monitoring quite closely, the impacts on consumer spending, because it has such a big impact on all of our consumption sectors. And, that is about 60% of our economy, unfortunately.
Thanks, Councillor Laurie. I think that's all the questions. I've just got a couple of brief ones. So page 37, at the very bottom of page 37, it talks about Nelson Tasman productivity being about 25% lower than the New Zealand average. So I just wondered whether we, maybe as part of Project Korkeri's conversations, whether there's been any discussion around things like the 4-day working week. And I know that there has been some trials done of this in New Zealand by large companies, and I guess measurement of productivity and that kind of thing, and there was I believe no drop in productivity over a 4-day working week. Just wondering whether that's come up at all. I can imagine it could really be something appealing, that you come to Nelson and have more time to enjoy the sunshine.
Look, that's a really good point. There was actually, as part of what the innovation neighbourhood's been looking at, not just 4-day week, also some much more flexible working environment. What I would say is, has it been a priority of recent times? No, but I think the outcomes of COVID are going to see, we're already seeing it, significantly different ways of working, which will cause some challenges in other areas like inner cities. I think the last thing I would just say around productivity though, and it is going to be a challenge over the next little period of time, because there's quite a focus right now on just job security or maintaining the same. Really in our region, it's a bit of a story about income levels. That's actually, those two things are so intrinsically linked, but great point, and yes, we'll look to leverage it as much as possible.
And further to that, that is another one of the issues, pre-COVID issues, that the interim skills, regional skills leadership group will be looking at to see how we can address moving forward.
Thanks for that. I think it's great to be looking at flexibility as well around hours. We, in a previous life when we had a company, we were I guess, had ultimate flexibility for our staff, and I know that it was both appreciated, and we had very low turnover as a result. So my final question's on page 63. It's the fourth bullet point down, where it's saying that NRDA has signed up to the National Tourism Industry Aotearoa Sustainability Pledge. That's great to hear, and I had a look into that. I hadn't heard of it. And it says that Goal 8, tourism businesses are measuring, managing and minimising their environmental footprint. So I guess I would just like to know, is NRDA, or have they benchmarked their, measured their carbon emissions? And are you going to be reporting on that publicly through your annual report, and also on any plan to reduce emissions? But I think for me the crux really is that you're benchmarking your emissions and reporting publicly on that year on year.
Two parts to the question. Two parts to the answer. One, no, we haven't done the benchmarking yet. But why haven't we done that? We actually hosted a workshop which became an online workshop, which ironically 80% of the people who registered to attend in person didn't turn up, but another more than 80% turned up online, which was quite interesting. And that was a session with ECOS, which was all around working out how the tourism industry in the region may wish to actually benchmark and get a consistent approach to our carbon footprint. Our thought process is that whatever that comes up to look like, we will then use NRDA. We will align to that so that we're absolutely being part of it. But just at the moment, we haven't necessarily put a lot of time and effort into that part of it just yet. The last thing I would say is, one of the two primary objectives of the destination management plan that sits within the statement of intent is around creating low impact, low carbon visitor journeys in the top of the South Island. So that's one of our big objectives, along with the Marlborough team. And we're looking to use this process to kind of create the benchmark and then work out how to measure that.
Thanks for that. I absolutely acknowledge that you've had a lot of other priorities on your plate. I just I guess, reiterate that it is really important that we walk the talk, and as an organisation, Nelson City Council, so all of our CCOs, COs, it's really important that we are all, I guess, in alignment on measuring our emissions and reporting on them publicly. So I've just got a final question, I think, from Mayor Rees, and then we'll be looking to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually quite keen to move this recommendation if I could, and I just want to acknowledge, while Mark and me go online, I just want to acknowledge success and the mahi has gone in over the last few months. And just draw the council's attention to an article from Rod Oram, which was around, which was a statement, we have the culture to prevail in relation to the impact of COVID-19. And he drew on two very notable examples of in New Zealand of where there is success and the right approach and the right culture. And he highlighted the Aotearoa Circles Fenwick Forum in their report. And I think elected members, you may recall I sent that through to you. It's perhaps a model that we could look at in terms of focus for our long-term plan. And the other example was the Nelson Tasman Region's Economic Response and Regeneration Action Plan, Project Kokiri. I hold Rod Oram in very high regard, and I think he is held in high regard around the country. And what he commented on is this is exactly what we need to build back better from COVID-19. So I just want to really acknowledge the leadership from you, Meg, and from you, Mark, and what you've done in bringing that project together. And now we're actually moving through into the action stages. So very happy to support the recommendation. I would note the matters that have been highlighted from the Martin Jenkins review, and these are really important. They're set out at 5.3 in the report, and that is a work on for all of us to make sure that we, over the next few months, get on and start to achieve the alignment that is needed, the clarity that is needed for NRDA, and actually enhance the way that we communicate the value of the Nelson Regional Development Agency. Because I think when you see the endorsement of people like Rod Oram picking two standout culture changes and opportunities in New Zealand, and the project led by the Regional Development Agency is one, is we need to celebrate what we've got locally. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Jessica, thanks very much for presenting the report. I've had Mayor Rees move and Councillor Edgar second. So if there's no debate, thanks. We've got Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, a number of statements of intent come into this particular body, and I just wanted to comment on the standard set by this particular statement of intent. In particular, I think its relevance and its focus on the current actual circumstance is exemplary, and I think the explanation about why something is measured, how it's measured, what the key performance measure is, and the baseline, I think sets a standard that is admirable, and just congratulate NIDA and the team on the standard of the report. I think it's excellent. Thank you.
I mean, I'd like to actually support Mr. Peters' comments. I also thought it was a gold standard statement of intent. So, and I really appreciated the switch in focus and how thorough and adapted it was to the current environment. So I've got Councillor Edgar who would like to speak.
Sorry, just a 10-second add-on to that is the section I was particularly impressed with was the risk management section. And because I don't think I've seen that in any of the other statements of intent, and I really appreciated seeing that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm putting the recommendations. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, thanks very much, Meg and Mark, and yeah, wish you all the best with everything until we see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So elected members, we have the representatives from the Bishop Suter Trust standing by to join us now. So we might, oh, they haven't joined? Okay, so we're going to take a very short break, just a couple of minutes, and we'll see if we can rustle them up. That's right, thanks. So we're moving on to item number 11, which is the Bishop Suter Trust adoption of final statement of intent, pages 116 to 157 of the agenda. And I believe that we have Julie Catchpole and Gay Hervey standing by. Good morning, or yep, it is still good morning. Welcome to both of you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you. It's Julie Catchpole speaking.
Hi, Julie. And Gay, oh, can you hear us okay? Gabrielle, sorry, but that's in the thing.
Yeah. There you are. Can you hear me now?
Hi. And Gabrielle, do you prefer Gay or Gabrielle? I've just got it written down as Gay, so I just wanted to check.
I really don't mind, whatever suits you.
Okay, thanks. So I think we've got Officer Ball here who will present the report and speak to it, and then we'll give you both an opportunity to speak to it, and then we'll have questions from members. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just presenting this on behalf of one of my team members who's on training today. So obviously this is the adoption of the final statement of intent for the Bishop Suter Trust. It's come back to you following some feedback from the committee previously, in particular requesting some further elaboration on carbon emissions and a timeline around that. The changes to the SOI are outlined in section 4.1, in particular 4.1.6 addresses the energy and carbon emission audit language change there. And I can let you know that in preparing that, we facilitated a meeting between Council's Environmental Programs Advisor Karen Lee and Julie Catchpole. I think that was productive and assisted in the production of the final document. So happy to take any questions, and obviously the representatives are here as well. Thank you.
Gabrielle and Julie, would either of you like to speak at this point, or shall I move on to questions from elected members?
I'll defer to Julie if there's anything she wants to say in particular. Otherwise, I'm happy to move on to questions.
The same point from me. I'm happy to move on to the questions.
Okay, thanks. Questions from any members of the committee? No questions. Oh, Councillor Courtney.
I'll just gather my thoughts. Visitation numbers, how are they holding up at this point in time? I think it's important we know that, because it's a very important asset for the Nelson City and Nelson region.
Julie, do you want to answer that? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's quite a positive story that we are able to tell at the moment, where we seem to be getting good numbers through the door. Obviously not the international visitors that we would normally be having, but your local constituents are enjoying the Suter, and we are managing to stage more exhibitions that are changing. The shop is being well patronised. Education classes are starting again, or have started again, and they've got good numbers. The only area that we're really being affected is through the theatre and the events that we had planned. We are unable to hold those while we're in this state of flux, I suppose. Julie, do you want to add to that?
Yes, we had a very, very positive July. Of course, level 2 brings with it some new challenges. So we are facing the prospect of class visits from schools, in some cases being cancelled. But on the other hand, we've had very successful after school and adult art classes going on. The biggest area, as Gay's alluded to, and you will have seen this effect in other council facilities, is in the performance, events, conferences, meetings space, which so we're not getting as much use of our theatre, although currently, having said that, it has got the Italian Film Festival running in it, but that has affected some of our numbers. But just in terms of general visitors, we're getting a really good, seeing a really good number of visitors through people travelling around New Zealand, what I call stuck in New Zealand overseas visitors. There's still quite a lot of those around, as well as our locals from the wider region.
Thank you, Julie.
I'll just ask a follow-up. Julie, is your board in good heart following the lockdown of COVID?
I think they are, but you might want to ask that question.
Is the board in good heart?
Yeah, my response to that is that, you know, we've got a couple of new board members who are proving very, very valuable and adding a skill base that we perhaps were lacking in the past, or a different skill base. In our previous board with Ian McLennan and John Hamilton, that was through the building process of the new gallery, and they were invaluable. Now we're moving more into being more proactive in terms of marketing and singing the song of how wonderful the suitor is, and that everybody should be enjoying it as much as they possibly can. And Judy Finn, who is an extraordinary marketer and has done amazing things with Neudorf and other establishments that she's involved with, who many of you will know. And so she is turning her skills to supporting the suitor, and I think we're really very much appreciating that. And Rebecca Mason, who has cast her eagle eye over some of the systems and processes that we have in place, and we are making some changes along those lines. So I'd say the board is in very good heart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gay. Mr. Murray? No? Okay, Mr. Peters? And then Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine's just a very brief question related to page 148, the Appendix 1. And it's the fourth dash point down under bullet 1, relating to taking advantage of higher interest rates. Just raised for me the question as to whether you have an established investment risk profile, and it's appropriate to these rather challenging investment times.
I'll just clarify that I think, Julie and Gay, that's page 25 of the SOI.
We actually just, Julie, you can follow up on this, but we just had a meeting with Francis Gargiulio and Greg Lilico from Jardins, who manage all of our funds. And we did have a discussion about that, and it's gone back to our Audit and Risk Committee to see whether in fact we should be changing our very conservative profile of investments that we do have at the moment, given that the interest rates are so low. So we haven't made a final decision of whether we should change that or not, but we're very aware of the fact that you know, we have a duty of care to those funds that we are very protective of and we need.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you for that, through the chair. Now, apologies if this was already addressed. I did just miss Roger Ball's introduction at the start. Just in relation to the section on sustainability on page 18, you talk about undertaking an audit. So is part of that audit mean actually, you know, measuring your emissions, so you know what your baseline is, so you'll know what improvements you're achieving? Because I know you're doing a lot of improvements, but it's always good to have that baseline to know where you've started and to see what your improvements are over time. So there's sort of measurement implied within those paragraphs.
We're about to embark on a process to do that, and using similar modelling and assessments as some other council-controlled organisations in council. So we can both measure and then start to look at mitigations. We very, very carefully monitoring energy and we've got lots of systems in place to do that, which just at the present point in time, that's one of our big concerns, because it's one of our big cost areas. But yes, we're about to embark on this project as we've got a performance measure in there to try and get a lot of this work done in this current 6 months.
Wonderful, thank you. And just my other question was on the review of the collection policy and the implementing the plan to make the collection directly accessible and searchable. So is there an element of that that includes digitisation? I'm thinking of the museum project where there's digitisation of a lot of their collection. So is there a digitisation element to this as well, or can you just explain what that means?
We're just about to put our collection live online. We received a very generous donation from one of our benefactors that's enabling this project. So we're hoping and aiming that we might go live on our 4th anniversary of reopening and the redevelopment. There's something special to offer out to the public. We're currently just working through all the processes to make sure there's no hiccups in that, and all the copyright and related matters.
Yeah, so it won't be the whole collection initially, but it'll be a very big chunk of what we've already got, images and clearance to be able to publish online. And we'll continue to add to that, because, and we're following the example of, I think it's the Sargent, isn't it, Julie? Is that the Sargent Gallery? And they've got a very successful platform that they've developed, and we're using that same one, so that we're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure the community will be very excited once that is launched, and I think it's a great accessibility factor. And as identified, one of your aims is, of course, is enhancing that relationship with the broader Tasman region, and I think it will help support that objective as well. And just wanted to thank you for how you've addressed our statement of expectation and then also the COVID crisis. So thank you for this final statement of intent.
Thanks, Councillor Edgar. I've just got a couple of probably brief questions. My first one was just following up on Councillor Edgar's questioning around benchmarking of emissions and a reduction plan. I think I would just like to encourage you to consider reporting publicly on your emissions through your annual report. I think that it just tells a really good story for Nelson and our significant art and heritage institutions when we're publicly reporting on I guess our emissions journey. And then on page 27 of the SOI, which is page 150 for elected members, about halfway down underneath other revenue, it says where artworks are donated in the trust for nil consideration, the fair value of the work is recognised as income. I'm just curious, is this usual practice? I just was wondering if it's usual, and does it present an accurate picture of income?
Julie, I'll leave that to you, but I would say that accounts are audited and we follow best museum practice anyway. So if you've got further comment.
The value of the collection, additions to the collection, is always added in and recorded in our annual report. Donations to the collection are recorded at current market value, and purchases are recorded at actual price paid. And that is a, I guess, museum gallery standard practice.
Thanks. I think I was just curious as that the fair value is recognised as income. I just hadn't come across that before. I'm sure there's nothing improper. I was just curious about it. Then the next question is just a couple of paragraphs down under volunteer services received are not recognised as revenue or expenditure and because unable to reliably measure the fair value. I just was wondering whether you had ever considered, obviously it can't be measured as I guess an actual revenue or expense, but again, in line with potentially reporting publicly on some of the impact, that if you were able to quantify the volunteer hours, a measure that is sometimes used by other organisations who have a significant number of volunteer hours is basing the volunteer hour times the living wage. That's kind of a tool that's often used for quantifying volunteer hours, just so that you can measure and report on it. Have you ever considered doing something like that?
We have a target under our performance measures of number of hours, average number of hours contributed per month. So we record it in that way and report on it in that way, but we don't turn it into a monetary value.
Okay, thanks. And my final question really is around the living wage in terms of staff at the SUTA. Do you have a commitment to the living wage? So are all your employed staff paid at living wage or better?
They're not. Not all our staff are currently on the living wage, and it is something that the trust is working on.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Julie. Would you mind expanding a little bit on what you mean by it's the living wage is something that the trust is working on?
Well, I think just to throw a little bit of light on this, most people are paid over and above the living wage, or there's just some part-time people, I think, who are perhaps quite junior who are not, or new. Would that be correct, Julie?
Yes, it's generally in the customer facing roles, but we're, within our resource trying to work to that objective of instigating the living wage in line with council.
Through the chair, do you have an idea, Julie or Gabrielle, when you'll know if that is achievable or when it might be implemented?
It's not something that we have put as a specific goal. I'm aware of the fact that this is quite a trendy thing around the country, and we obviously would love to be able to pay people more than they are currently paid, some of them. And I think you could just say it's on our goal to do it. We just don't have a specific date.
Through the chair, with respect, Gabriel, I hope you don't see it as just a trendy thing for institutions and companies and businesses to be doing. I can assure you at Nelson City Council, we don't see it as something that's trendy. We see it as an equity issue and actually really important.
Okay, I apologise. I probably shouldn't have said that. It is something that has come up, and we've actually discussed it with the council, with your representatives, our manager from the council from time to time, and they've, because initially we were not able to do that. We are slowly working towards it. It all comes down to the amount of funding, and we didn't want to ask for any more funding to achieve this. So we're slowly getting there, but it's just taking some small incremental steps.
Well, from my part, I look forward to hearing progress on those steps.
Okay, and there will be, you can rest assured that there will be, as there has been in the last few years.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. I think that that's it for questions. So have I got somebody who would like to move the recommendations? Okay, I've got Councillor Noonan who'd like to move it and Councillor Courtney who would like to second it. We've got Mr. Murray who would like to debate.
Thank you. I'm supportive of the resolution, so I have no problem voting yes. But look, I'm looking at the suitor's balance sheet, and I'm looking at the Nelson City Council's position within that balance sheet, and I suppose I'm raising a little bit of a concern from Nelson City Council's perspective that we do not have a smart risk management position within that balance sheet should something eventually happen with the suitor and it gets wound up. And it's really around having a think about that. My read of the information is that being an equity position within the suitor, which is how we're recorded, means that once they pay off their creditors, we then have to apply to the court basically to maintain our position on the relative assets that are left other than the collections. So I don't think that that's really the brightest place to be. I'm not sure it's the intention of both organisations. So I would like to suggest that over the next period that some thinking be given to how Nelson City can make sure it's got a sustained and a sure position in the organisation in the event that it does get wound up and we protect our investment in that scenario. So look, I'm happy to support the resolution, but I just wanted to put on the table that I think that we need to have a wee bit of a think about how we're positioned here in the longer term in the event that something does happen.
Okay, I think that's a very fair comment, and Julie and I will take that back to our Audit and Risk Committee, and they will discuss it. And do you want us to come back to you, John?
Yes, I think my suggestion was around perhaps a discussion with officers first in terms of how that reorganisation could happen so that it could be brought back if indeed there was an appetite here at the table to improve and to protect our position around our investment with the suitor. So yes, but I think it's an officer discussion first in that instance. That would be my suggestion. I'm happy to take comments on that though.
Thanks, Mr. Murray. Anybody else wanting to debate? No. Julie and Gabrielle, I would also just like to echo, I think, Councillor Edgar's comments around your response to the really challenging time that we're in, your modification of projections, financial projections and that kind of thing in light of the current environment, and just to really acknowledge the great work of all of your volunteers, your staff, everybody on the board who's working so hard to continue to provide our community with this really wonderful cultural experience. So yeah, just ngā mihi nui to you all. And on that, I would like to put the recommendations. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Gabrielle and Julie, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay, thank you very much for having the opportunity.
Thank you.
So elected members, it's now 12:15. I would like to suggest that we break for lunch. I'm thinking 45 minutes, wondering if anybody feels that that's not enough time, please put your hand up. Councillor Courtney, do you feel like you need an hour?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, but I'm open to whatever the majority feel about it.
I'm happy for now because I've got to go.
I mean, we've got quite a lot more to get through. So if Councillor Courtney, I absolutely acknowledge your preference, but in this instance, I'm going to ask everybody to be back here by 1 p.m. But first of all, we are going to move into confidential so that we can, I guess, wrap up with this part. So
stop the live streaming.
Yep. So what I'd like you to do is just refer to your agenda we had a procedural recommendation to allow representatives from the Bishop Suter Trust to stay on, but this is now not needed. So we are now at item number 12, exclusion of the public. We have a number of items which you will see in your agenda, 6, and I'm really happy to read through the reasons that we're going into confidential if somebody would like me to do that. Sure, Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wonder why the process of going into confidential before we go and have a lunch break. It looks like we've had a very long confidential meeting. I'm just wondering what the thinking is around that.
Through the chair, that is so that we can stop the live streaming and staff don't need to be worrying about that over the lunch period. So we close off that.
I think we can be quite transparent with the public that we're having a 45-minute lunch break. We will be coming back at 1 p.m. for the confidential session, and I'm hoping that we'll be done within a couple of hours. So I don't think there's anything improper about that. Would anybody like me to?
Sorry, I didn't mean it was improper. I just wondered why the process, because it looks like we're having a very long confidential meeting. That was the only reason why I asked the question, not that there was anything wrong with that. I just needed to know why.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so nobody's wanting me to read through the reasons that we're going into confidential this time? No, okay. So then have I got somebody who would like to move the recommendation for the exclusion of, okay, thanks, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens, seconded, Councillor Edgar. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks very much.